Few characters in the wizarding world evoke as much fascination and heartbreak as Sirius Black. From his audacious escape from Azkaban to his tragic demise, Sirius embodies both rebellion and tragedy in equal measure. Yet, among the many what-ifs lingering in the minds of Harry Potter fans, one stands out. What if Sirius Black had never been sent to Azkaban in the first place? Could this rebellious, fiercely loyal wizard have avoided the horrors of the Dementors and the wrongful accusations that branded him as a traitor to the Potters? To answer this, we must delve into the tangled web of mistrust, betrayal, and systemic failings that led to Sirius's imprisonment, and consider the alternate choices he could have made along the way. Sirius Black's downfall began long before the Fidelius charm that was meant to protect James, Lily, and Harry Potter. It was rooted in a single fateful decision: his belief that switching Secret Keepers to Peter Pettigrew would outsmart Voldemort. The logic behind this choice was, in many ways, sound. Sirius knew that Voldemort would suspect him to be the Secret Keeper, given his status as James Potter's best friend and closest confidant. By shifting the responsibility to the unassuming, seemingly harmless Pettigrew, Sirius believed they had concocted the perfect decoy. But in hindsight, Sirius's critical mistake wasn't just choosing Peter. It was failing to anticipate the fragility of his own assumptions. Sirius never doubted his judgment, an arrogance that often accompanied his quick thinking and headstrong nature. If he had chosen differently, perhaps keeping the original plan in place or choosing a more steadfast wizard such as Remus Lupin, the Potters might have survived. So, what could Sirius have done differently in that pivotal moment? The answer lies in understanding trust and its flaws. Sirius's loyalty was unwavering, but his failure to extend that same trust to Remus Lupin, whom he wrongly suspected of betrayal, created a gap Voldemort could exploit. It's a poignant irony that mistrust of one friend, Remus, led to blind faith in another, Peter, ultimately paving the way for disaster. When Sirius arrived at Godric's Hollow and discovered the Potters dead, his grief was immediate, but his response was impulsive. Instead of seeking help or reporting the betrayal to Dumbledore or the Ministry, Sirius sought Pettigrew with the intent to take justice into his own hands. This act of vigilante revenge sealed his fate. Pettigrew's staged explosion framed Sirius perfectly, and the Ministry, eager to close the case quickly, arrested him without trial. Here, Sirius had another opportunity to alter the course of events. If he had resisted his urge for immediate vengeance and taken even a moment to think strategically, he might have uncovered Pettigrew's treachery in a way that could stand up to Ministry scrutiny. Dumbledore, ever the champion of justice, might have intervened. Moreover, the presence of any witnesses, an aura, or even a bystander could have shifted public perception. Instead, Sirius's fiery temper and refusal to play by the Ministry's rules left him isolated, silenced, and easy to convict. But could Sirius really have avoided this outcome given his personality? It's important to consider who Sirius Black was at his core, a man shaped by years of rebellion against his oppressive family and their dark legacy. His tendency to act first and think later wasn't just a flaw, it was a survival mechanism. Yet, had he channeled his Gryffindor bravery into calculated action instead of reckless rage, history might have remembered him very differently. Sirius's story also sheds light on the wizarding world's systemic injustices. The Ministry of Magic in this era operated more like an authoritarian regime than a fair governing body, particularly in the wake of Voldemort's first rise to power. Azkaban was a tool of fear, and the Ministry's priority was maintaining order, not delivering justice. After Pettigrew's staged explosion, Sirius was condemned without a trial, a glaring failure of due process. In truth, even if Sirius had tried to plead his innocence, it's unlikely the Ministry would have believed him. His lineage as a Black and his reputation as a rule-breaker worked against him. He was exactly the kind of scapegoat the Ministry needed to reassure the public that Voldemort's followers were being brought to justice. This raises a crucial question. How much of Sirius's fate was truly in his control? While his impulsiveness certainly contributed to his downfall, it was the Ministry's willingness to overlook key evidence, like the lack of a body for Pettigrew, that cemented his imprisonment. Even the most strategic moves on Sirius's part might have failed in the face of such systemic corruption. This exploration of Sirius's choices and circumstances reveals that his imprisonment was not solely the result of his own flaws, but a tragic intersection of personal missteps, misplaced trust, and institutional failure. Yet there are still more threads to unravel. Alternate paths he could have taken, hidden implications in the wizarding world's lore, and deeper lessons about justice, loyalty, and trust. If we delve deeper into the alternate paths Sirius Black might have taken, we find that many of his missteps stem from his unwillingness to lean on others. Though fiercely loyal to his friends, Sirius had long lived with the belief that he couldn't rely on authority figures or institutions for support, likely a consequence of his upbringing in the toxic Black family. This belief, while understandable, ultimately left him isolated at critical moments. Had Sirius been willing to trust others in the days leading up to and immediately following the Potters' deaths, his fate could have been drastically different. One major missed opportunity lies in Sirius's decision to act alone after discovering the Potters' betrayal and death. Instead of immediately hunting down Peter Pettigrew, he might have sought help from Dumbledore. The headmaster was not only highly respected within the magical community, but also possessed a deep understanding of the nuance. Dumbledore's sharp mind and influence within the Order of the Phoenix would have made him an ideal ally in exposing Pettigrew's treachery. Moreover, Dumbledore's pensieve, capable of storing and reviewing memories, might have provided Sirius with a powerful tool to prove his innocence if he had used it to document the events surrounding the Potter's protection under the Fidelius charm. Similarly, Sirius could have turned to Remus Lupin, whom he tragically and incorrectly suspected of being a spy for Voldemort. Although their relationship was strained at the time, Remus's calm demeanor and tactical thinking could have balanced Sirius's emotional impulsiveness. Together, they might have formed a plan to uncover the truth about Pettigrew, or at the very least, to ensure Sirius's side of the story reached someone who would listen. This choice would have required Sirius to overcome his paranoia, but it might have spared him the long years in Azkaban that followed. At the heart of Sirius's downfall lies the Fidelius charm, the complex and powerful spell used to conceal the Potter's whereabouts. As secret keeper, Peter Pettigrew held the crucial information that ultimately led Voldemort to Godric's Hollow. But what if Sirius had made a different choice regarding the spell itself? Could this decision alone have prevented the tragedy? One possibility is that Sirius could have insisted on sharing the burden of the Fidelius charm with multiple secret keepers. While the charm's mechanics are not fully explained in canon, the notion of dividing the secret among a trusted group isn't far-fetched. Imagine if Dumbledore, Sirius, and Remus had each carried part of the secret, with none of them holding the entire location. Even if one of them had been compromised, it would have made it far more difficult for Voldemort to locate the Potters. Another option might have been for Sirius to act as secret keeper himself, despite the risk of being targeted. While Sirius's logic in choosing Pettigrew was based on sound reasoning, diverting suspicion, it's possible that the directness of him holding the secret could have simplified matters. With his animagus form as a dog, Sirius was well met to evade capture. By keeping the secret and hiding himself immediately after the charm was cast, he might have succeeded in protecting the Potters and avoiding suspicion altogether. Of course, this choice would have required a degree of trust in his friends to protect him from Voldemort's agents while he was in hiding. Something Sirius might have struggled with, given the paranoia that ran rampant during the war. It's impossible to examine Sirius's downfall without considering the shadow cast by his family's dark legacy. The Blacks were one of the most infamous pure-blood families in Wizarding Britain, known for their staunch loyalty to Voldemort's ideals and their disdain for anyone they considered beneath them. Although Sirius had rejected his family's beliefs and even run away from home, his name alone carried connotations that worked against him in the eyes of the magical community. The Ministry's eagerness to imprison Sirius without a trial can be partly attributed to this stigma. In their eyes, he was the estranged heir of a Death Eater sympathizing family, a man with both motive and means to betray his friends. His association with James Potter, a well-known troublemaker during their Hogwarts years, only added to the perception that Sirius was reckless and untrustworthy. This prejudice likely influenced the reactions of those around him. Consider the lack of advocacy on Sirius's behalf following his imprisonment. While the Potters' deaths were undeniably a devastating blow to the Order of the Phoenix, the absence of public support for Sirius suggests that even his allies may have harbored doubts. If Sirius had been more conscious of the stigma attached to his name, he might have taken proactive steps to distinguish himself further from his family's reputation. perhaps by seeking public allies within the ministry or by documenting his loyalty to the Order. These efforts could have given him the benefit of the doubt when Pettigrew framed him. The tragedy of Sirius's imprisonment extends far beyond his own suffering. His absence had a profound ripple effect on the lives of those around him, particularly Harry. Growing up without Sirius as a guardian, Harry endured years of neglect and abuse at the hands of the Dursleys. While Dumbledore's reasoning for placing Harry with his Muggle relatives is understandable, the protective magic of Lily's sacrifice required Harry to live with her blood relatives. It's difficult not to wonder how different Harry's childhood might have been if Sirius had been free to raise him. Moreover, Sirius's imprisonment left a gaping hole in the Order of the Phoenix during Voldemort's first downfall. Without Sirius's strategic mind and fierce loyalty, the Order was left weakened, forcing others to take on greater burdens. It's worth considering how the war's aftermath might have shifted if Sirius had been present to help rebuild in the wake of Voldemort's defeat. Would he have acted as a unifying figure among the scattered members of the Order? Sirius Black's story is one of the most poignant in the Harry Potter series, not because it is flawless, but because it is so profoundly human. His mistakes, his impulsiveness, and his defiance are inseparable from his love, his bravery, and his fierce loyalty. To imagine how Sirius could have avoided Azkaban is not simply to rewrite a tragedy, it is to reflect on the weight of choices, the power of trust, and the failures of an imperfect system. These reflections offer lessons not only about Sirius's character, but also about the wizarding world as a whole. Once imprisoned, Sirius faced the near-impossible challenge of proving his innocence. Without access to a trial, a wand, or allies, his hands were effectively tied. However, Sirius's eventual escape, using his animagus form to slip through Azkaban's bars, proves that his resourcefulness and determination endured, even in the bleakest of circumstances. This raises an intriguing question. Could Sirius have devised a plan to prove his innocence from within Azkaban itself? One potential avenue might have been to communicate with Dumbledore. While the Dementors prevented most prisoners from maintaining coherent thought, Sirius's ability to remain mentally intact due to his animagus form could have given him an advantage. By transforming into a dog and using his animal instincts to resist the Dementors' despair, Sirius retained enough clarity to plan his escape. If he had focused on sending a message to Dumbledore, perhaps through one of the ministry officials tasked with inspecting Azkaban, or even by smuggling out a note, he might have found a way to spark an investigation into Pettigrew's disappearance. The Marauder's map, too, could have been a vital piece of evidence. Had Sirius managed to recover it or enlist the help of someone like Remus to do so, the map's ability to reveal Pettigrew's presence as Scabbers could have turned the tide in his favor. While this may seem speculative, it is grounded in the idea that Sirius's sharp mind and connection to the past, in the form of the Marauder's magical inventions, might have offered him tools to counteract the injustice of his imprisonment. Furthermore, Remus might have offered him tools to counteract the injustice of his imprisonment. Beyond his personal decisions, Sirius's story is a sobering indictment of the wizarding world's legal and judicial systems. Azkaban was a place designed not to rehabilitate or uncover truth, but to punish, often without scrutiny or fairness. The lack of a trial for Sirius speaks to the Ministry's desperation to restore a sense of control during Voldemort's First War. To them, Sirius's apparent guilt was convenient. It allowed them to present a scapegoat to the public and move on. This systemic failure has deep implications for how justice functions in the magical world. Sirius's case is far from unique. Innocent people like Stan Shunpike were similarly imprisoned during the Second Wizarding War, demonstrating the Ministry's long-standing reliance on fear and expediency over truth. These injustices challenge the audience to consider what might have been different if the wizarding world had prioritized fairness and due process. Could a functioning judicial system have saved Sirius? Could other innocent lives have been spared as well? This theme also ties into Sirius's own understanding of the world. Raised in a family where power and blood status trumped morality, Sirius rejected those ideals and instead embraced values of freedom and defiance. Yet even as he turned away from the black suppressive dogma, Sirius struggled to navigate the systems of power within the wizarding world. His imprisonment is a stark reminder that even the most rebellious spirits can be crushed by an unjust society, a parallel to Harry's own eventual confrontation with the Ministry's corruption during the Order of the Phoenix. While it's tempting to think of Sirius's downfall as preventable, there is also an argument to be made that his fate was, in many ways, inevitable. As the godfather of Harry Potter, Sirius was always destined to be deeply entangled in the events of Voldemort's war. Even if he had avoided Azkaban, his loyalty to James and Lily and his position within the Order of the Phoenix would have kept him in Voldemort's crosshairs. Moreover, Sirius's own character, his recklessness, his thirst for action, and his fierce independence suggest that he might have faced danger regardless of the specific circumstances surrounding the Fidelius charm. In another timeline, perhaps he would have been captured while fighting Death Eaters or targeted directly by Voldemort. This doesn't diminish the tragedy of Sirius's story, but it does reinforce the idea that his life was shaped by forces larger than himself: family, war, and the persistent shadow of Voldemort's influence. One of the greatest what-ifs in Sirius's story is the timing of his escape from Azkaban. Had he broken out sooner, before Harry's third year at Hogwarts, the entire course of events might have shifted. As Harry's godfather, Sirius would have had both a personal and a legal claim to custody of Harry, a claim that could have challenged Dumbledore's decision to place him with the Dursleys. While Sirius was far from a conventional parental figure, his love for Harry and his understanding of the wizarding world might have provided Harry with a more nurturing environment than the neglect and cruelty he experienced at Privet Drive. A Harry raised by Sirius might have grown up with a stronger sense of his own identity and a deeper connection to his parents' legacy. However, this scenario also presents its own challenges. Sirius, still a wanted man in the eyes of the Ministry, would have had to live on the run, constantly protecting Harry from both Voldemort's followers and the authorities. Still, the thought of Sirius raising Harry is a tantalizing glimpse into what could have been, a reminder that even amidst the darkness of the wizarding world, there were glimmers of hope and love that might have been nurtured under different circumstances. Ultimately, Sirius Black's story is not one of simple redemption or triumph. It is a complex, layered tragedy that forces us to grapple with the imperfections of both the wizarding world and the characters who inhabit it. His wrongful imprisonment reflects the dangers of mistrust and the failures of justice, while his escape and eventual reunion with Harry offer a bittersweet reminder of the resilience of love and loyalty. Sirius's life is defined by his contradictions. He was a man who hated his family but carried their legacy, who loved his friends but struggled with trust, who valued freedom yet spent much of his life in confinement. These contradictions make him one of the most compelling characters in the Harry Potter series, a reminder that even the brightest stars in the wizarding world can be overshadowed by darkness. And yet, despite his flaws and his tragic end, Sirius's impact endures. He gave Harry not only a glimpse of the family he had lost, but also a model of bravery and defiance in the face of injustice. In exploring how Sirius might have avoided Azkaban, we come to understand not just his character, but the larger truths of the wizarding world, that loyalty can be both a strength and a vulnerability, that justice is often imperfect, and that even in the darkest of times, the bonds of friendship and love remain unbreakable.